Antennas, SWR and Coax. Why is it so important? I'm G6PNH and we're going to have a back to basics look at why it's important to get everything matching. A few days ago we were looking at a quad band radio that somebody studying for their exams, for the radio exams that is, had bought. We put it on to 2 meters, put him a quarter wave whip up, and Julie had a go to make sure it was working. His question was, why can't I just put it onto the other bands using that 2 meter quarter wave whip? Come to realise that when she's setting up, you need to know some of the basics. Then somebody else commented, well, it would be nice to get back to the basics, and that was a returning amateur. So here we go. Let's try and explain what we need to do in practical terms and where some of the theory fits in with the practical as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at your radio, the coax, and then your antenna. There's your antenna, and see where it all fits in. Your radio is manufactured to be a 50 ohm impedance. That then means that your antenna needs to be 50 ohm impedance, and although we actually buy the coaxial cable, we need to buy it at 50 ohms. What we'll do is we'll look at, first of all, the antenna, and we'll look at getting that to the right length, and we're going to look at the SWR, which stands for standing wave ratio, and with that we should be able to see why it's so important that that is matching with your radio and with your coax. So first of all, let's have a look at a simple straightforward antenna, and we're going to have a look at a quarter wave. Now sometimes they're called half waves, and that's because of the construction of them. Basically, to get a 50 ohm antenna, a really basic one, you look at a quarter wave. Now that's a quarter wave of your frequency. Now to be able to work that out, we do a simple calculation. We take the speed of light in meters per second, and we divide that by the frequency. Now to make an easy calculation, we can take 300 and divide it by the megahertz, and that's just basically rounded up. So for instance, the centre of my working, or most of my working, is 145, especially on 2 meters. I like 2 meters, but I work down the bottom and I work up the top as well. So the centre for me is 145. So if I take 300 and divide that by 145, I actually get a little bit more than 2 meters. In actual fact, we get 2.0689 meters, or converted to millimeters and rounded up, we get 2069 millimeters. Now if I divide that by 4, that will give me my quarter wave, and that's the length then that I need to make my SWR come somewhere near. Now it's not 100% guaranteed. It depends on your coax, your equipment, all sorts of different things. Maybe how near to the building it is, whether it's up in a loft, whether it's near glass, whether it's near a frame that's made of metal. There's all sorts can affect it. But that would be the optimum size that you would need. After that then you need to go and check it. But let me show you very quickly how a quarter wave is constructed as well. Right, so we've got a quarter wave area. We've done our calculations, we've got it to the right length. I can stick that outside, but I can't just stick it up as it is. I need some kind of reflection on the bottom. We often call that a ground plane, and that's why a dipole often becomes known as a half wave dipole, because you have another quarter of a wave coming out of the other end. Okay, let me show you the diagram. So on the diagram you've got some coax coming up to a quarter wave. The inner will go to one side, the outer will go to the other side. It's quite simple. As long as you've got both sides the right length, you should get a decent SWR. Now, in some cases we put it on top of a car. In my case I use a mag mount, and that the car then becomes what is known as a ground plane. So that's the bottom part of your aerial, or in the case of the diagram that you just seen that was horizontally polarized, it could be the left or the right, but it's usually the outer braid, it won't be the inner. Okay, it's the outer braid will then be earthed to the car. Now I was saying that there's lots of factors where your SWR might go up, and when you look at a mag mount they're well known for having bad SWR. So what is all this SWR anyway, and what's it all about? Right, well let's have a look. Let's go and have a look at an SWR meter and see what we're actually measuring, and at that point it may become more clear to you why it's important that we get it right. This meter shows you clearly the forward power to the aerial, that's on the left hand side, and the reflected power on the right hand side. You can see with the 2 meter that the reflection is negligible. However, when it's switched onto the 70 centimeters, it's 3 watts forward and 0.1 watt reflected. I'll leave it to you to find an online calculator, work out the SWR, and then leave the results in the comments. So you can see from that SWR meter that we have forward power and we have reverse power. Now that amount of reverse power that you can see, particularly on the 70 centimeters one, is important. We don't want too much of that going back into the radio. If you've got the length of your aerial wrong, you've got your impedance wrong, and more will come back down the line into your radio. Now if we're looking at a handheld radio, they're fairly rugged and they'll take a little bit coming back down. So if you're doing SOTA, so you're up on a mountain and you put an aerial up and it's not quite right, if you're only using a handheld you're not too bad. If you're using a mobile, like this mobile here or this one down here, you've got more power going up, so you've got more power going back down if your SWR is out. Now I mentioned mag mounts. Mag mounts are notorious for having a bad SWR, so any mobile I've got, I've also got a little fan on top. You can see one on the top of there. So I've got a little fan that will help to cool it down. That's the plan. But you've still got power coming back into your radio. Now fortunately most mobile radios are rugged as well. However, when it comes to the 991A that I have to make sure that that SWR is always there. I'm checking it all the time. It's got an automatic tuning unit on it. I'm checking that all the time because I don't want too much power coming back down. I tend to run it a lot lower. It's capable of 100 watts. I won't run it at 100 watts. 80 on HF, and then what I do is I turn it down to 5 watts on VHF, and then I've got a linear amplifier to amplify it back up. So I'm not overrunning the radio. I'm not expecting too much coming back down from the radio to hurt it, because it's an expensive piece of kit if we make a mistake with the SWR and we blow the end up. Now, one last thing to look at, and that's the coax. Well, why is the coax so important? Well, let's have a look at 3 different types of coax. We can get a really cheap one, often used for CBs. It's the RG58. But we can get some slightly better ones than that. We can get some really thick stuff. The problem with the really thick stuff is that, okay, we won't lose much, but do you really want it traipsing through your house? I'm downstairs, my shack's downstairs, and I've got coax, 5 different lengths of coax coming all the way down the stairs. What I don't want is anything 10mm or more. 7 is enough. The RG58 is round about 5 or 6mm. The problem with the RG58 is it's constructed so cheaply that we lose the power out of the coax as the power is going up the coax. So we're losing it out of the sides. What we want is some kind of a compromise. Just in terms of how much power are we losing, well, we calculate it in dBs. Now, when we look at a quarter wave or a half wave dipole, we tend to take those as 0. Then if we start putting a 5/8 up, or some people call a white stick, then we're looking at increasing the gain. But really what we're doing is we're trying to offset the losses in the in the coax against the aerial and against anything else we've got going on as well. For instance, I've got some switches round the back down there. They lose about 1 dB. Similarly, if you leave an SWR meter in line, you're going to lose some dBs. So once you've got your SWR right, here's a tip: once you've got your SWR right, trust it, take it out. A lot of radios these days have SWR meters built into them, and the 991A has one. You can either look at the power, the ACL, but you can watch the SWR at the same time. So you can take your meter out, you've no losses in terms of your meter. And I can't believe that sometimes I see people with radios that have got SWR meters in them, but they feel that they've got to have one that they can see working manually as well. It's like, well, you might as well put RG58 all the way. Let's go back. Let's have a look at what losses we can actually lose and what compromises we can make. We have RG58 at 100 megahertz you lose 20 dBs for every 100 meters, whereas with Mini 8, again at 100 megahertz, you lose 10 dBs for every 100 meters. However, the Westflex 103, again at 100 megahertz, you lose only 5 dBs over 100 meters. If you've been watching the past videos, you'll have seen being able to choose what radio is suitable for you. This video then should now set you up to say, what else do I need? What do I actually need physically to get on the air? And how do I need to go about it? Hopefully it's given you an insight. So you've looked at the aerial system, you've looked at the coax, you've looked at the SWR, you've seen why it's so important, and hopefully you've seen how to reset it. With aerials that you can reset, you usually get a little bit of a grub screw and an Allen key. You can just adjust them. A lot of aerials these days are already set, they're already done, and the amount of adjustment that you do is very, very minimal. If you bought what they call a white stick, which is just a straight put it up, then there's no adjustments really to make on them, and the SWR on them is pretty good anyway. I didn't show you the SWR on that because mine is that good, there's nothing to see, hardly. So that's it. Hopefully that gets you going with your SWRs, that gets you going understanding why you need the aerials. Hope you've enjoyed the video, hope it's been useful to you more than anything, and until next time, this is G6PNH wishing you best 73s.